This episode is a grounded, honest look at pattern recognition across startups, building in emotional categories, and redefining success as life evolves. It's a conversation about tech, relationships, fatherhood, and why human connection remains the through line in everything worth building. This isn't your soft launch. This is the hard launch, where we talk about what it takes to build love, businesses, and everything in between. I'm joined by Dylan Petro, founder of WedPing, and Morgan Kennedy, a photographer and business owner herself who's turned into a core member of the WedPing team. Before WedPing, Dylan built Bounce, a dating app launched in New York City that helped thousands of people meet in real life, giving him an early education in building products around trust, timing, and human connection. He's now applying those lessons to WedPing, a platform helping couples simplify communication, RSVPs, and the entire guest experience. Morgan is bringing the on-the-ground wedding perspective, translating years behind the camera into building businesses that actually work for couples and vendors. Today, we're digging into managing multiple businesses, how tech and AI are reshaping the wedding and event space, and so much more. Are you guys ready to get into it?
Wow, great intro. Yeah, let's go.
Awesome. So, Dylan, I'm super curious about your entry into entrepreneurship, and talk to us a little bit about how you initially started building businesses. I know WedPing is not your first. So, how did you decide that this was a path you wanted to pursue? And how did you identify initially the first problem that you wanted to solve? And I know that was with specifically Bounce, but how did that kind of come about and what was that journey like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, most of my friends would probably tell you that I have like too many chaotic ideas. And I think they're too nice to me to tell me that it's annoying, but it's probably annoying. I'm just like constantly thinking, constantly energized by things I see in the universe. So it sounds like very vague, but I just think there's so many cool things, so many cool people doing cool things and cool problems to solve. So that's, I would say, my just penchant for coming up with ideas, creating, designing. It just made me really want to build and make things for the world. And that passion led me down the journey of, hey, I want to build things that people find value in, that are cool, that are new, that are different, that really bring people joy. So I probably started, actually, oddly enough, I would say I started out making a ton of videos when I was in like middle school. I loved making videos and it was just like almost pre-YouTube era. I made some really like bizarre videos with my friends, like just this was old school like tape recorder videos. And as I moved into high school and college, I actually did videography for my student government where I went to college. And just like the process of making and building things that people love, that documented events in cool ways, just was really, really fun and rewarding. And once I started getting deeper into college, I started getting really into design, UX design, and just thinking about building products. And at that point, it was, I guess, like 2010, 2011. So you didn't have, Figma or all these amazing tools, but it was starting to become a little bit easier to design things in graphic design programs. And then right before I finished college, I was like, almost dead set that I was going to do something in marketing or something in media or something like that. I actually interned at Time magazine before it went defunct, or I guess it's not technically defunct, but when it was more of a thing. And I was like, you know what? I actually want to like build the products. I just don't want to design the products. I don't want to market them. I actually want to build them. So I stayed an extra year at college to get a CS degree, learned a lot about development, and that's what really set me on this passion of wanting to build things. I actually worked at a company in New York that did digital marketing for 3 years as a software engineer. And then with a friend of mine who I met in college, I'm actually still working with Adrian. We decided to launch Bounce, and that was our first venture. So I would say, all in all, super long answer, but it really came from a place of just like loving creating.
That's amazing. I think people don't understand how much sort of internal drive has to be there in order to start building something. And, it came from a place for you for wanting to solve problems and seeing those problems out in the world and being really passionate about creating something to help people. And I think that's an internal drive that sort of is innate for a lot of founders and entrepreneurs that sometimes gets underestimated or maybe not talked about enough. And it's amazing that it led you down this path where now you're several ventures and you've built so many different products. But I'm curious, in that first few experiences, or maybe even just the very first experience in building, what surprised you the most, and how did you how did you like handle that, and what was the most surprising, whether it be with scaling the product or the initial 0 to 1? What was the most surprising, and how did you handle that and kind of take that with you in future projects?
Yeah, I think the most surprising thing is there's just such a big difference between a product getting some traction and it getting like crazy traction, right? And that golf is huge. And I think as someone building something, you almost need to convince yourself that when you're not there, that you can get there, that you are there, that it will end up there. And I think when we built Bounce, we hadn't had a product that like blew up. And candidly, Bounce didn't blow up. I mean, I think at our peak we had like 10,000 or something monthly active users in the city. So it was like it was meaningful and people were going on dates. I mean, several people had gotten married from it. But I wouldn't say it was like the type of product that people would use it once or twice or 5 times and then they would tell 10 of their friends about it, tweet about it. It didn't have that level of intensity. On the other hand, we built as a fun side project during like the 2020 election season, basically a weather app for polls. So it was like, your iOS super simple weather app. We made one for political polling, and that like really took off. Like to the point where I think during like close to the election, we were getting like 10, 15,000 downloads a day, and people were emailing us constantly being like, add this feature, add this feature. Lots of people were telling us that the data was like fake or wrong, which was just fun as well. But you could tell people were like obsessed with this thing. They were checking it like 10, 15 times a day. And it was very timing dependent, but just like that level of intensity is very different than even a product that's doing reasonably well. So I think that was like, it wasn't, I don't know if surprising is the right word, but it was almost humbling to know. And it was educational to know that like there is a big difference between, hey, people are interested in this. It's a pretty good product. You're on the right path. And like this thing is like crushing it and is extremely valuable and you've really hit a nerve.
So I guess, what advice would you give to founders who might be on the side of it hasn't hit a nerve yet? You've clearly experienced product market fit versus working towards product market fit. And
Yeah.
how did you know in the situation where it didn't hit a nerve right away, that if you didn't just put in a little bit more time or a little more effort, like tweak it or pivot, or I mean, pivot is you may not even needed to have pivoted, but like, iterated and kind of like
Yeah.
found the path to hitting a nerve with that. How did you know that that wouldn't happen, or what kind of stopped you from pursuing getting to that point, even if it didn't hit a nerve immediately? And the reason I ask that is because so many founders, I mean, there's so many people building so many things, and a lot of them are not hitting product market fit right
Yeah.
away. And if they're not hitting it right away, what advice would you give to know the difference between like, okay, this is not something that's going to get there, versus if we just kept on pushing, it can get there?
Yeah. Morgan and I talk about this sometimes with our team about like when we go through our meeting notes, we talk when we do our weekly meetings, we talk about what are the things that are like moving the ball forward pretty foundational, and then what are like the high potential pieces, right? What are the things that are like big swings that we think will kind of move us up in a stepwise type of way. And when it comes to product or like what the problem that you're solving is, I think that if you haven't hit it yet, the only thing you really, really need in my mind is some type of audacious hypothesis of your business, right? It doesn't mean that the thing that you're trying to do has to be like crazy different or something like that, but you do need to have something about your product, something about your offering, something about your solution that you feel like can hit a nerve, even if it hasn't yet, right? And so if you're sitting there saying, I talk to 10 people every week and talk to 10 customers every week, or I've had 100 downloads every week, but no one's using the product constantly, right? Or no one's like shooting me emails or something like that, you may not have hit any nerve yet, right? You might not have that thing that's hitting any type of nerve. With Bounce, what was interesting is we had daters who would tell us when I got a date, I threw my phone across the room. They were like, I cannot imagine that I'm going to go on a date tonight. It's crazy. And to us, that said, okay, look, there are, at least for a small subset of daters, people find this like extremely compelling and they find it like stressful a little bit. They find it like a little bit like freaky, which is good, right? It's a good thing. And I think as long as you are building something where you feel like you have that kernel of intensity or thing that can bring that intense solution or intense interest to someone, then I think you can keep kind of going down that road. I think if you're talking to a lot of people and they're all giving you sort of like 6 or 7 type of feelings on the product, or they're like, yeah, this is good, like I wish it had this, maybe then it would be more useful. If you're getting a lot of that, I would just evaluate and say like, is is there something that you can change about the solution, or is there something that you don't quite understand about the problem that you're not really finding that nerve that you're hitting?
So, what was it for you with Bounce that made you think, okay, this is not going to be something we can find a path to product market fit with?
I actually think that it was almost an element of it was a really good product, not an amazing business. And I could spend like 2 hours talking about the economics of dating apps. But short answer would be that our app was designed in almost an overly authentic way where every person you were seeing was also seeing you. And there was no gamification of the swipe, no leveraging you to say, hey, this person seems really desperate to get a match. Let's paywall them to keep swiping. We didn't have any of that. And that made it less of a good business, at least by existing dating app standards. People talked about like, can you partner with restaurants? I think that was something that in theory could work. But TLDR is I just think the business, the way the business was structured versus the way the product worked didn't align super well. And then the pandemic did hit us like basically right, a year and a half in, and we just weren't getting that like growth virality. Plus we didn't have a good enough business model that we felt like it made sense to kind of actively sustain it. But I thought from a product perspective, it was a really compelling product. So I would say we had like half of the equation: product very compelling, business slash like just growth loop. Like we never really quite got as good as we wanted to there.
Very interesting. I think there's so much more to I keep unpacking, but I'm also curious about how you transitioned into the wedding space, given now you're building WedPing. Was building in the wedding and event space a natural evolution for you, coming from the fact that you were building kind of one step before marriage, which is dating and connection and human connection, right? You were like on that side of the spectrum. Was moving up that chain kind of a natural evolution? Or was there another reason that you decided this is what you wanted to commit to and wanted to start building?
It's funny. I'm like, I should do like dating, then weddings, then baby, which I did make a small, a personal passion project, a little baby app for my 6 month old. So, and
I
then
love
like,
that.
I mean,
Relationship
I guess,
maintenance.
yeah, there's lots of steps. No, I don't think WedPing was particularly informed by my experience with Bounce as far as like I would say the only through line is I do love building, like our team honestly all loves building joyful products. Like it's really fun to co-experience someone's like or help augment someone's really joyful moment in life. Like I think there's enough products that feed kind of some of the like less savory parts of our personalities. So I think being able to participate in something so joyous as like a wedding or even dating, I think is joyous in its own way. Is really just exciting and fulfilling. So I would say that's the through line. But WebPing really came out of really two things: a combination of personal experience, really maybe three things: personal experience, getting married and doing it during COVID and having to send a lot of text messages and knowing how time consuming that is. Two, when I worked in New York, I worked at a company called Braze that did digital marketing, so push notifications, emails, etc. And I had a lot of experience with running these campaigns, and they're very effective for getting people's attention, right? And then three, and so I was thinking like, can I combine kind of my experience and product knowledge in that area with the wedding industry? And then three, I also really just like to build products that bring something really powerful to a customer that typically doesn't have great tooling. So even in the wedding space, like couples have a lot of really great tech tools, but I would say planners, like it's getting there, but don't have as many amazing tools. So really when I built it kind of from a couple point of view, but when I started talking to planners and talking to Morgan about, her experience working with planners, it became really clear that planners just didn't have a great communication tool, and that's how WebPing was born. So a little bit born out of past experience, but really thinking like, hey, we like building products that kind of fill a niche and fill a customer that is typically underserved. And we have a very small team, so we're not, we didn't raise $30 million. If we raised $30 million for WebPing, we probably wouldn't be able to, one, but also it's like, it's not on its face like a giant business out of the outset, but it is definitely a business that the customers are missing something really powerful here. They're typically underserved, and we're excited to serve them.
That's also what brought me into the space because I mean one of the many reasons, but one of the reasons is that it was such an underserved market and I saw such a gap coming from my own experience also as someone that would plan a wedding and just noticing that really all the stakeholders in this space are not set up with any type of tooling that allows them to set up their businesses successfully, allows them to execute the wedding successfully. like from planner to venue to vendors to the bride and the couple and their guests, right? I think all across that chain, it's just been such an underserved market for so long. And you're right, there are more and more, now kind of solutions in the space that are starting to innovate and look at this vertical, but it's been some time since that has happened. Morgan, I'm also curious what got you into the wedding space, because I know your business has been based a lot in wedding photography, and obviously your network and sort of work with the wedding industry is kind of probably how you and Dylan connected initially. And I'm curious what got you into the space, and maybe just for some context, like what did those relationships with the planners look like, and what did you see to be the missing piece of the puzzle as it pertained to your business and as you saw some of these other businesses in the space operate as well?
Yeah. I mean, what got me into the wedding space was a little bit of an accident. I started doing photography in college, full transparency, just to pay for school. And that used to be something that I was, I guess, not as proud of. It was just something that I did in the moment to make it through school and pay for my education. And then as I've gotten older, I've really come to appreciate that I was so scrappy and willing to put so much time into a business and build a business. But I was actually shooting weddings while I was in school. My couples had no idea that I was in college. Maybe they did and they just never told me, but I don't think most of them knew. And so I would travel and do shoots. I'm from Georgia, so I was traveling up to Atlanta and doing shoots, doing weddings, and truly stumbled upon weddings. It was something that I always had in my head. I was eventually going to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought that maybe I would go into some type of corporate event and then maybe eventually wedding planning of sorts. That was just my personality, being very organized, being very type A. I love the design side, but it wasn't necessarily my huge talent. I was definitely more organized than anything. And I planned someone's wedding in college for fun, and that was great. And then I started shooting weddings, and I was like, okay, there's something here. I love weddings. I love the process of live events. There is something so special about being a wedding vendor. The couples, the relationship I have with those couples, I mean, they will truly be with me forever. And it's so cool to be a part of their days, meet their families, meet their friends. And I think that's been a huge thing on vendor side to understand and appreciate. And of course, as a vendor, I always wanted to give a couple the best experience. But as a vendor, you're also running, of course, a business and you're trying to understand how can I make this profitable? Not only how can I make it profitable, but how can I make it manageable and not feel like I'm drowning 24/7 because it is a lot to run a business. It's also a lot to run a wedding business because emotions are a large part of weddings. And it was such a gift to be a wedding photographer. I did it for 8 years and absolutely loved it, but had so many vendors coming up to me asking about marketing ideas and branding ideas just from stuff that I was doing on my own, and it was starting to click that that was very odd. Most people are in a business because they're passionate about what they're actually doing with photography. I was passionate about business, less so about photography specifically, and I also am very passionate about weddings, so it happened to work quite well when started with WedPing and, really understanding the marketing and the sales side. I think your question as far as, like, what gaps did I notice? There's so many gaps in the wedding industry, particular when it comes to tech, but also really when it comes to organization on the back end, workflow organization, and just an overall. Typically, we're using programs that weren't actually created for wedding vendors. We're using other programs that happen to work for wedding vendors. But the wedding industry is huge. I mean, we are a massive industry, and I say that we all know each other pretty much, but we're a huge industry in numbers and in just overall, overall for I think the US, we're huge in numbers and for the economy, but which is great, except for we are missing in some areas. So it's been fun to work on the other side of it. Not boots on the ground anymore, but still fun to work on the business side.
That's so cool. I feel like the stars aligned with
Yeah.
like the opportunity at WedPing, given a lot of what you're interested in and also what your background is in. Um, Dylan, I'm also curious, like now that you have Morgan, you guys are growing the team, what has the journey of growth been with WedPing and, the journey towards product market fit and scaling the company? And how does that compare with growing and scaling some of the other ventures? Specifically, you mentioned, there was Bounce, which didn't hit a nerve right away, but then there was another thing that you built that really scaled and grew very quickly. So where does WedPing sit in sort of that spectrum, and how has the journey been growing both the team, the product, scaling, and getting to this point?
Yeah, they're also different, and I would say WedPing is business to business, or I guess business to business and kind of B2C as well. So our clients are both planners as well as couples, though we really our real hero client is our planners. We think that they're the ones who really know how to run an event, know how to manage comms. Couples do as well, but we think there's, the planners are the ones who are just like we're most excited to work with them. Um, and and I say that mainly because, as I said, planners just they don't have the best tools. So we're here to help them out and help them be awesome. In terms of how the journey's differed, the biggest difference in WedPing is we are doing a lot more just direct sales to planners. And I'll let Morgan speak to this a little bit more, but a lot more direct reach outs and just trying to figure out how to get the attention of planners. And there are a ton of planners. I think there's like 30,000 or so in the US. But that number is actually, when you kind of think about it, is not incredibly high. And planners are super busy. Most planners tell us that they get somewhere like 300 emails a day. So getting their attention is really the biggest challenge. And then I think the other thing that's interesting with WedPing, maybe relative to something like Bounce, everyone was familiar with dating apps, right? Like at the point that Bounce was out, I think something like 80% or 90% of adults were using dating apps. WedPing is interesting in that, let's say most weddings still don't use the form of communication that we offer. They don't offer text. They don't have this very real-time dynamic communication. A lot of it is website and email. And probably 9 out of the 10 planners we talk to have not used something like this. It's pretty rare that we actually talk to a planner that has a system that they're looking to change. Most of them are like, we haven't done this yet, or we've heard about it or had a couple couples asking. So we're a little bit on the upswing, we think, in terms of this being something that's really important. So I do think we have kind of two different challenges. One is, how do we get planners' attention? And they are having tons of people who are looking for their attention, right? And then how do we convince them that this is something that's really important to add into their workflow, given that it's a little bit of the early stage of this being requested? I'm certain that if we talk in 3 or 4 years, every wedding that you go to will have some type of text-based guest communication or something that's upgraded over the current kind of email website paradigm. So those 2 points in mind, I would say the growth journey here is about, one, building like a really strong, authentic, clear story about what we're doing. And then two, really trying to get and connect with planners in like an authentic, real way, which Morgan, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. I mean, I think that Morgan's been huge, just given her industry experience and helping us build those really strong connections with industry professionals. Because, I've been to a lot of weddings, but I've never worked as a vendor or planned a wedding. So there's just something like completely different having that empathetic, like real experience of running events, like the both of you have actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was going to ask that as my next question, and Morgan, this is probably somewhere where you can chime in. How are you guys breaking through that noise? Because we're finding the same challenge. We have the same challenge. We're fighting the same fires. Like although our primary customer is, well, I would say planners and venues kind of go hand in hand, but it's noisy, and they are getting pitched so many things, and they are so strapped for time, especially in this specific industry. So how are you guys breaking through that noise, and like what is your strategy around standing out and making sure that you get their time and attention? And then not only that, you're building ahead of your time, right? To your point, we're in the same boat. Like we're building such an innovative tool and such an innovative solution that like it's almost really difficult for them to wrap their heads around the fact that like, how will I use this, because this is something I've never used before. It's a change in behavior that is so drastic, but talk to us in 3 to 5 years from now, this is what everybody's going to be using, and like you'll look back at this time and think, oh, I don't even know how I lived without it. But it's that conviction that we have as founders, because we are forward thinking and kind of forward looking, and we believe in this so much, and we understand what we can do with technology. But it's much more difficult to convince somebody who's not in our position as a founder, around seeing that that much ahead of time, seeing that far into the future, and like convincing them that like this is worth your attention, even if it's 5 minutes. Trust us, like this is what you'll be using, and be like, if you're not using this, you're going to fall behind.
I think one of the main benefits or things that we've been able to kind of understand and empathize with is that we know that wedding communication is not what it needs to be. And thankfully, a lot of the planners that we talk to are also on board for that. They understand that yes, they could email people if they want to, but they also get to wedding days and realize, okay, my vendor team has read nothing and the wedding party has read nothing. They're not on time or the shuttle is not running correctly. How do we get in touch with them? Thankfully, they have so many real life experiences that we're able to understand and say, yes, you've had an emergency where you had to change the venue, or yes, you had something change last minute and you really needed everyone's contacts. Because of that, we're able to say, cool, let's hop on a call and we're going to show you how this product uses, how you can use it, but also how it would have saved you in that moment from not just being a great planner, but to be an exceptional planner. And I think the other conversation and way to kind of help has been we're not trying to do anything but elevate them. And they're spending hours and hours and hours on these events and hours planning events, so much time curating vendor teams, so much time making sure that the couples understand this is how it's going to run and this is where your money is going. So to make sure that it all actually runs smoothly and the guest experience is what the planner is promising is essentially it's a partnership between communication and what they're creating, but making sure that they get that is also very hard, right? And a cold email to explain that quickly is not easy. So it's definitely, I think, been beneficial. Of course, I know people in the industry, so that's been a great way to try to get connected to people and say, hey, remember we worked together 5 years ago? Remember when I gave you all those recommendations? I would love to talk to you. So trying to pull some of those, which is great. But I think more than anything, being genuinely excited for it and being persistent and telling people, I know this is going to help you if you just give it a shot. And I know this will make a difference if you just try it. Thankfully, we do get on most calls and people are like, yeah, absolutely. This is something that we need. It's again, on being on the upswing has a benefit, but we are still working a little bit against getting people on a call anyways. But I think every business goes through that. Everyone goes through trying to get someone on a call. Everybody thinks their time is the most precious. And so trying to honor that in every way.
Absolutely. I mean, we we fight that headwind every day and just trying to get like 5 minutes of their time or bubble our emails up to the top of their inbox and because they're just drowning in emails. Like there's so many emails that they're getting. They're in the middle of this, that, or this season, even if it's off season and they're not in the middle of actually executing events, they're like looking ahead and planning, like that's all that's going on in their head. So it's amazing you guys are able to kind of leverage previous, relationships and also the fact that they already understand the value in the product. If you do get them on the phone, I think is a huge, huge testament sort of to the problem that you're solving and the solution that you're building. What has been the evolution of the product? Like, what was the earliest version of WedPing and how has that changed to now, given every product kind of goes through its own evolution? I can say that for ourselves. If you look back to like our alpha or like our initial launch, it was literally like I mean, Dylan, I think you
I
downloaded
used it
Gia.
for
Yeah,
sure.
you
Yeah.
downloaded us like what,
I was an
like
OG
probably,
Gia head
yeah, 8 or 10 months. I don't even remember, maybe a year ago now, but
a
I
year
can
ago.
tell you
Yeah.
that the product is completely different from a year ago, right? And you have to go through those iterations. In my mind, I've yet to talk to a founder that has not gone through those iterations. So I'm curious, what did that look like for WedPing and what was that first version and how far has it come?
Yeah. When WedPing first, actually, I would say the first version of WedPing is still probably the highest value part of our product, though we're just kind of learning into some other areas that we think are high value, but we took a little bit of some detours, or I'll call them detours along the way. So, first version of the product, super simple. You could add guests, you could group your guests, you could send messages, you could schedule messages. Scheduling messages and grouping guests, still the two most important features in the product by far. So I think thankfully we kind of hit the two foundational things that every planner asks for like right away, which is good, right? I mean, it's not rocket. It wasn't necessarily lucky. It's not rocket science. And no one was doing it particularly well, but we just did it reasonably well. And I think actually just harkening back to the last question, something I will note on the product side is I think one of the things that's worked well for us, the product's very simple. So one advice to people, especially if you're doing something where you're doing a lot of demo calls or you're working with someone who's super busy or who doesn't have 6 months to do a tech integration, if you can get them to see the value in like 2 minutes of your demo call, you have a really good product and you have a good opportunity to sell them. And for WedPing, like we really actually can get on a call with someone, send them their first WedPing message. It's personalized. It's, they can see how it can be scheduled and everything in literally 2 minutes. And that's been a really nice feature of the product, is how quickly it is to demonstrate value. And as we've iterated on the product, it was really a function of finding our market. So because planners were so busy, right? We said, okay, well, we should see what it looks like to go after to market to couples, right? Because the solution worked great for couples. We have couples who sign up for WedPing every, week, and they're running their wedding on it. Great. They haven't talked to us. They're like, this makes sense. Amazing. But so in doing that, we're like, okay, the thing that's adjacent to guest communication, or where guests get in their information, is a website, right? And managing RSVPs. So we actually built out a website and RSVP suite to accompany our guest messaging platform. And we tried some different couple-focused marketing tactics. I would say I would say our website is, and I'm always very transparent, is like good and targets certain types of couples really well, but we definitely have some gaps in the styling of the website that we learned from couples. But it didn't necessarily in and of itself, that kind of product motion, like, bring a massive wave of couples. So once we kind of realized, okay, couples, we haven't hit a nerve with couples yet, and we're starting to see some traction with planners. Let's just go back and double down on planners again. And that's around the time that we met Morgan, which I think has really supercharged that outreach and supercharged our understanding of planners. And as we've done that, now we've started to kind of, on our demo calls, start seeing planners asking, like, what about this adjacent thing? So something that Morgan brought up early on was vendors. This would also really, sending blast messages would really benefit vendors, because vendors also get this old school long email. Can we send them the right information at the right time as the wedding weekend is approaching, as the actual events are unfolding? And we have planners who are organically asking for that, right? So the product is really starting to evolve to just better and better support planners and planner teams, and really become like a full service way for them to manage their communications, both guest side, and we're starting to dip more into the vendor side. Along the way, our team is very interested in experimenting. So really early on, you ask the question of, what do you do when you aren't sure which direction, like, you're not sure you've hit product market fit yet. And don't do this all the time. Like, you want to always keep your foundation, but it is always fun to experiment, right? So, for example, something that we did, everyone's using AI. We added a little, like, AI auto reply functionality into WedPing. So that if someone texts you, you have the ability to opt in and get an auto reply message. And what's interesting about that is some planners are like, no, I hate AI. I don't want to use AI. It feels like I don't know what it's going to say. These couples are paying me a lot, investing a lot of money to make sure everything is perfect. I don't want the AI to say something unexpected. And then some planners are like, oh my gosh, yes, we get like 100 messages. Like, if you can get a 95% accuracy, like, yeah, let's do it. So, we've also tried to evolve the product with a little bit of experimentation and bringing in some things that, are not super difficult to build, but give us potentially a hypothesis of something that people might talk about, right? Oh, wow. Like, WedPing can answer guest questions immediately. I don't have to do anything. And we've definitely had some planners where that's been a really big interest point. But yeah, I would say the core part of the product has been pretty consistent. And as we've really understood our planning customers and really had more reps with them, we've just been able to build better and better for them.
That's amazing. I think it's so great that you kind of hit on the core so early on, and we're able to kind of build around that moving forward. I wouldn't say that's like the experience for every founder, but I would say that, like, if you can find that core early and build around it, that is probably like going to set you up pretty well in terms of like hitting an product market fit and kind of growing sustainably within a reasonable amount of time. And speaking of time, can you just give us a sense of like the difference in amounts of time to grow something like a WedPing versus Bounce versus like the other example that you gave us that did hit product market fit right away? Because I think a common misconception is these things happen overnight and you either know right away or you don't know right away, and then like move on with your life, or like keep building and like keep pushing because now you've hit product market fit. But it doesn't happen overnight. And, I've known you, Dylan, for some time, and I've seen this journey, I've seen this evolution. And, I think it's just a testament to it doesn't happen right away, and you really need to kind of stay the course and navigate that course until you do hit product market fit. But I'm curious, like in the instance where you did hit product market fit, what was the time to product market fit from like 0 versus something like a Bounce versus something like WedPing?
Yeah, I think the one that got really popular was called Pocket Polls. And that one's really a testament to luck, actually, which is not great advice. I mean, I think that the design of the product was well done. Like, I think the product was well designed. It was super simple, very crisp, and I think that is what led to this next part, which is we got approached by Apple to say, "Hey, can we feature you in our like news section?" So as soon as we got that ability to be featured in the news section, then the downloads like skyrocketed, right? Because we're just being shown in front of lots and lots and lots of potential, users. And then to the point where, it was election, a week before election, 2 weeks before election, it was like the top of the, news recommendations that started going up the news charts. And it was just luck, right? To an extent that the Apple editorial team decided like, hey, this is something that we want to feature. Now, even then, and this was a side project for our business, so we weren't, spending tons and tons of time every week. But even then, like they first featured us during the primaries, it was kind of slow, and then the feature came back in right before the election, and then it was like that's when we got a lot of traction. But so I think that also speaks to this idea of just time being. There's probably some cliche quote about like creating a company is about just staying alive long enough until something works.
I've seen
So
that
that's
quote.
it's
I've seen that quote.
yeah,
I remind
it's
myself every
probably a
day,
bit of
just
an
stay alive one more day.
it's been an example. It's an example of that, but honestly, candidly, that one's mostly luck. And then in terms of bounce, I think bounce and WedPing are somewhat similar in the sense that I actually think what you do want to see early on is like someone's obsessed with it, right? And you'd much rather have like one out of every 1,000 person that you talked about the product be obsessed with it, which is you're not gonna have a sustainable business if that's your hit rate, but like someone's obsessed with it versus I have 50 people, but no one really cares that much and they're sort of using it, but they drop off. Like if you're seeing a lot of that and you just can't find your obsessives, then I do think you probably need to change something. Unless the obsessive is you, because it's totally like there are some companies that run off the obsessive of their founder and like their founder is like, I'm gonna figure this out no matter what. This is the way that I envision this problem being solved. And is it the highest percentage chance of success to get that way? Probably not. But like you need someone who's obsessed. And for Bounce, for example, we had someone who was like wanting to host bounce events for us and was like constantly sending us ideas like everyone on my team would Adrian, particularly my partner at the time, would know exactly what I'm talking about. But like this person was like obsessed with the product and like that energy of obsessive customers really helps. So I think that the ability to kind of keep building on that obsession, those obsessive customers, is really the thing that you just need to keep seeing. And hopefully the share of your obsessive customers just keeps increasing, right? And I think that that is what it really comes down to. And if you are like a year or 2 years in, or a year and a half in, you should give yourself, I always feel like you should give yourself at least a year and a half to figure something out if you really care about it. But if you're that far in and you've tried experiments, you've talked to a lot of people, you've tried a lot of distribution approaches, and just like you're sitting there and you're like, no one would care if this product went away tomorrow, then like I would say you're not to be tough, but like something probably needs to be changed up. You're probably chasing after like a solution that probably isn't quite right, or a problem that's not quite painful enough.
Yeah, I think that's great advice because it kind of delineates like when to stop trying to stay alive versus like really kind of being honest with yourself and saying, okay, this is either not the right solution. And I think like one big kind of distinction though is it doesn't mean you have to give up on building. It just means maybe you're building the wrong thing and you need to like completely reassess like the solution that it is that you're building. And maybe it's still the same problem, but you're kind of iterating on the solution so much so that it's like a completely different solution for that space. And like now you've built a solution that people are obsessing over. And sometimes that other iteration or other solution isn't even that far from what you're building. It may just be like, tweaking a few things or changing some things that like, or even positioning it in a way where like now people understand truly what the value add is. And yeah, there's so many variables or kind of levers that you can pull to figure out what to change. But I totally agree. I think, you have to find your evangelists or your ambassadors. And like, if that's not happening, then maybe it's time to think about a change. I'm curious, how do you think, like if you were to look 5 to 10 years from now, how do you think AI tech, but specifically we have to talk about AI, is going to impact this space, the wedding space? And And this question is sort of for both of you. Like, if you look, 5 years down the road, what do you see for the role that tech and AI will play across the spectrum, not just planners or consumers, but sort of the ecosystem of stakeholders within the event planning industry?
What do you think? Do you have a thought, Morgan?
I mean, I have a couple of thoughts. Because my background is not in the tech portion and in just the wedding portion, and now being on the other side with tech has been really interesting. But I think it'll always be something that can be a useful tool, but the benefits of weddings are that they are live events and they require people to be actively there doing something physically to help. And whether that's a florist or a catering team, whatever it is, they're still going to have to be there. So it's good news in that way for the event industry. I do think there are still a ton of products or misses or something in terms of how live events run and how we could be using tech and AI for it. Of course, they believe heavily in WedPing and being able to help that solution, but there is, and I don't even know that I know what it is, because looking forward thinking, I don't think even 10 years ago, if you told me content creators were gonna be huge at weddings, I would have probably been like, "Yeah, maybe, but not really." I would never be thinking how almost every wedding that's a high-end or luxury wedding now is using them or is interested in using them. Maybe they don't end up, but they are curious, and I would have never said that 10 years ago. So, I think it's hard to know what we're missing until it's right in front of us, which I guess is the benefit of when you are in the tech world of trying to figure out what that gap is. But there still seems like there's something in terms of how little tech you use on a live event day. Um, but that's where WedPing comes in. And so do all the
Exactly.
other tools. But
Exactly.
yeah, there's definitely still some misses, but I don't even know that I know what they are.
I'm waiting for the first wedding planner who specializes in human plus AI weddings and AI weddings. Like, two agents are like, we want to get married at, I mean, you could imagine that, right? I mean, it'd be kind of weird, but, like two agents are like, hey, we traded a bunch of cryptocurrency in the back end and we want to get married in the Presidio. Like, who's going to plan our agentic wedding? I mean, I
It's
could
gonna
see
be
that.
somewhere in the Bay Area that it
Exactly. This
happens.
would only resonate with people here in Silicon Valley in the
Yeah.
Bay Area. Nowhere else would that even be something that people could understand or wrap their mind around.
Well, the beauty of a lot of these, like the LLMs and AI agents, are they're actually super accessible. Like in a way, like they're very easy to understand. Like my grandma is pretty tech literate, but I think she's 89, and she understands. I downloaded ChatGPT for her, and like the interface is simple. And actually, it dovetails a little bit into WedPing, where we get on calls with people, and they'll say at first they're like, "Well, is my grandma gonna like understand a text?" And I'm like, "Wait a minute, text is the easiest, right? Like, is an easy interface to use." So I actually think I think yes, AI to AI agent wedding probably not, but I do think that there is something to this idea of like it is a conceptually easy interface in a way. And I think that there's also this pretty interesting universe that's going to happen maybe, and I think Natasha, what you're doing with G is very planted here of like customers or couples who are getting married, clients like wanting to more deeply visualize and understand what their wedding experience is going to look like. Like I think that I don't know what's I think there's gonna be a divergence in some ways because I feel like millennials especially like love to hyper plan. They like to hyper plan their trips. They like to really like know what they're getting into. They don't really like to let someone else take the keys and run with it as much. So I do think AI can even like enhance that itch or like scratch that itch even harder where someone really wants to like work with a planner and work with an AI assistant to like really visualize and really, I mean, yeah, I'm plugging you a little bit here, Natasha, but I mean, it makes
Thank you.
total
This
sense
was
to
not
me.
paid. I did not pay him to say
Um,
this.
but on the flip side, though, I do think that there's certainly with any like innovation, there's going to be sort of like like almost like a Luddite style. I don't even mean that in a mean way, because I do think there's certain things about AI that are very challenging and people just don't like. And I think you will see a lot of events that are a little bit more unplugged, a little bit more like lo-fi style as well. So I do think that there's that element of it too. The hardest thing for me that I don't know with AI is like, will the generation getting married next will they what will their relationship and feeling about the tech be like, right? Like will, silent discos are popular at weddings. Like will there be like metaverse style, AR style it sounds ridiculous, right? Because we're all like, millennials who our whole wedding experience is like beautiful paper goods and florals, but it's hard to say. Is it something that someone who's 18 right now and decides to get married in 10 years, will they feel like, yes, now I'm a mature 28-year-old, like I want the paper goods? Or will they think like, I love my AR glasses and I want like an AR dance party? We don't know. I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see.
It will be very interesting to see, but I think, like, to your point earlier, it's not even almost about the tech, it's about simplifying the tech. Like, we know the back end of the technology and that it's, like, very innovative, but it's bringing that in a simplified version to anyone and making it accessible, and them almost feeling like it's not tech that they're using, but they're just integrating it almost so organically and so naturally into their experience, whether it's day of or in the planning process, and making that experience feel so simple and so seamless, where they don't even think about the fact that they're now using text across so many parts of the process. And I think, like, to your point earlier as well, you simplified WedPing, or WedPing has always been like a relatively simple interface, a simple, very simple kind of core at its core product. And we went through the process as well, where, I made the mistake, and first time founder, I will like put my hand up for that. Like, I made the mistake of building, way too complex and way too much, way too fast. And we are now going through the process of, okay, we know this is our core, and now we need to like pare down and strip away so much of the platform and kind of the feature set. And that's not a bad thing, but it's because we have so much clarity on like the core, and how do we make this so simple for the brides, the couples, the planners, the venues, such that they don't feel like they're even using tech. It's just such a simple experience. And I think that's like advice for any founders out there, because I made this mistake, and it is definitely something I would have done differently. And that we've gotten to the point now, which is great, where we've learned this is our core. Let's simplify it. Let's strip away everything around it so that people don't even feel like they're using AI, because there is a lot of pushback right now around, oh, AI, like, we don't want, I mean, I get this all the time. Like, I don't want to, this is so AI. This is too much AI. And it needs to feel like it is AI, but it's not. And I'm curious what you guys would say to the people that push back on, we don't want AI, or AI is not like something we're going to embrace. I'm sure you were faced with that. What would you say, or what do you say in those instances to change that mindset a little bit?
Yeah. It's like, remember when truffles were a really big deal? Like everything was truffle, like truffle mac and cheese, truffle, or maybe bacon was one of these, right? Everything was bacon. I think the biggest thing is just like not, in certain industries, you want everything to be bacon, bacon chocolate, bacon this, bacon that. Like coding right now, I mean, you shouldn't launch a product for developers if it's not like has AI 7 times in your domain name. But like in the wedding space, you understand your customers and know that it's an ingredient that can help make the dish, the offering really strong, but you're not bringing in that ingredient just for the sake of bringing in that ingredient because it's trendy. So for us, it's one, like this AI response is very opt-in. It's something that we give the opportunity to kind of go both ways depending on your preference. And if someone pushes back, in general, I mean, our product isn't hyper AI centric, but I feel like if someone pushes back in general, my thinking is usually a little bit of a crawl, walk, run approach. So, when you use AI, you're ceding a little bit of control. So, like, do the thing that you have control over first, right? We offer, a standard auto reply message. I always tell planners, like, if you're not, some planners will look at it and be like, yeah, let me mash that button. I'm doing that tomorrow. But then some are like, oh, that's cool. I don't know. Like, how does it do this? I'm a little nervous about this. Okay. Just like first get used to the platform, get a feel for what people are asking, then enable it, right? Then bring a little bit of that like truffle or bacon into your dish when you feel ready. So I think that products, especially who are addressing people who aren't either have so I would say if someone just hates AI, I'm not going to try to like Jedi mind trick them to not like it. But if someone's a little bit concerned about certain aspects of it in terms of consistency or accuracy or privacy, which are super valid, I do think having a little bit of a crawl, walk, run and giving them kind of opt out options as they go along and like easing them into the value of what you're offering and offering something truly valuable, not just a bolt on piece of the system. And I do think what you said of making it feel almost like not AI is great. Like we had someone that we talked to at one of our events who was receiving WedPing messages, and she was like, I sent this one message at 11 and you responded back at like 11:02 with like a very like well put answer that was like brief and thoughtful. And I was like, I think this is AI because it was so fast, but it felt correct. Like it felt good. It felt well thought. And that's like kind of where you want to land, right? It's your point about not making it feel like tech. So I don't think anyone's going to be against getting like a good right answer for the wedding, as long as it feels, accurate and doesn't feel and feels reasonably personal. So it's also about, I think, just iterating on, prompts and iterating on the experience of the product itself.
Mm-hmm.
And centering it less on this idea of like, is it AI or isn't it AI? Just thinking about it as an ingredient.
Exactly. I love that advice. Switching gears a little bit, I know that you recently became a dad and you
Yeah.
recently had a little girl. And I'm curious, like, how did building while becoming a parent impact your perspective on this journey and maybe even your definition of what kind of ambition and success looked like, if that changed at all?
Yeah, so daycare is quite an investment, so it made me realize that, like, I need to sleep a little less and work a little harder and sell more so that, we can afford daycare. I'm
That
just kidding.
happens. We went through the
But
same realization.
yeah, I think thankfully I've always had, like, just based on my team, the way our ethos is around work is like we've always had a very strong balance of when you're working, like, super focused, really just figure out what's highest value and run after it. Our team is awesome. There's four of us working on WedPing, and we always just look for people that are super high trust, super high ownership, like give you your time when you want it, when you need it, and don't like really ask too many questions. Try to focus meetings on, so just really like give people a lot of autonomy. And I think as a parent, that's huge, right? Like I've managed teams of almost double digits of engineers where you do not have that same autonomy, and it's much harder to get that. And I'm not saying that's not a great role to have. I just think that thankfully the way that our team is set up and the way that we work like lends itself really well to also taking care of a little baby and supporting my partner who does work at a larger company and has like a less of that like natural autonomy than I do. So I would say net like it's made me appreciate that. It's made me appreciate the team that I have a ton. Like everyone's awesome and super supportive and super flexible and just like works really hard and does awesome work. I know there's a huge like 996 trend in Silicon Valley right now. Like I the thing the hours and like the just being there to be there, I'm not a huge fan of. Like I wouldn't run a company that works that way. The thing I guess I am a fan of is like when you're working, like lock in and do it, like don't say that, hey, I'm online and I'm working, and then also try to do seven other things at the same time. Just say like, hey, I need to go out for 2 hours to go do something and just go do it, right? So I do like the idea of like really focusing. But yeah, I think net, I've been really lucky, and I would encourage anyone who's thinking about going on to like an entrepreneurial style journey that it is doable with a child, just with the right kind of team and balanced understanding with your partner. It is harder for sure, in a lot of ways, definitely. And I think just in general, it's made me I mean, just having a child gives you a lot of perspective, and at the end of the day, like, you wanna spend time with your partner and or in my case, my wife, Boo, and Lumi, and we wanna hang out and sing songs and have fun, and it's just also nice to have that, like, forced mental break to say, "Hey, like, let me move away from this and enjoy this, like, little special person and help her grow and be raised." But I think my other thought, though, is you should try to do that even if you don't have a child, or you should be creating those spaces for yourself to kind of like take a moment to step away from what you're grinding on and enjoy something different. And I think it's not doesn't mean that the thing you're working on isn't super important and awesome. You should constantly be thinking about that, but have the ability to take time for yourself for what you need to do that's outside of what you're working on.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's so important. And I think that's why this like 996 culture is so toxic, or 966, whatever the numbers are. It's so toxic. And I do think it's like glamorized that, like, oh, you're sleeping under your desk and you're like this startup founder that is, taking zero breaks. And like, how sustainable is that? And like, at what cost are you doing that? And you're doing it definitely at the cost of your health. There's no question about that. So I think taking breaks and like having kids is a nice forced break. And it's a break that is so joyous and so wonderful. But I do think that it's like quite problematic that we are glamorizing this culture of like, don't take breaks, sleep under your desk, be this founder that is grinding all day and all night. And I just think we need to like change that narrative a little bit, or a lot. Um,
Yeah, it's super bipolar because I think the one thing I will say is there are definitely times in any like business where it's going to get more intense. And
Yes.
there might be a week or two where like you have to say to your partner, like, hey, or they have to say to you, like, hey, like this is my like huge planning week and I'm just gonna be like really crushed this week. Like, can you help out? Can you help out more? Can you handle this thing I usually handle? And I think that's okay. Like I think that I always like when I manage people, I would always tell them, like, hey, you're joining a small company. For the most part, you should not feel exhausted at the end of every week, but there's gonna be some weeks where you feel exhausted. And I think that there's just people, I think with the internet, and I mean, I just sounded like a very, I don't know, old crotchety person, but like everything's super like bipolar. It's one way or the other. It's not, there's no nuance to it. And so I think that you're going to have some really hard, tiring weeks, but then you're also but you just don't want every week to feel like that, right? You want most weeks to feel manageable.
Yeah, and I think like one of the benefits being a founder and the nature of being a founder, but also being a founder with kids is one, you make your time spent extremely like efficient, and the way you spend your every minute, you don't have the option to like log on and like kind of pretend you're working. You are locked in, or you've lost your day and now you can't get anything done because like daycare pickup is around the corner and that's it. So I feel like you have to you're forced to prioritize your time in a way where you are locked in the time that you actually can work, because you know how limited that time is as a parent and a founder. But not only that, even if you aren't a parent, if you're a founder or an early member of a team, there is so much to work to go around, and you are wearing so many hats that again, you just don't have the option to like, quote unquote pretend you're working, or like truly not be efficient in how you use your time, because there is so much to move forward, and what you move forward moves the needle for the business so much in those early days that you either do it and get it done or you don't. So I couldn't agree more with everything you mentioned. Last question, because I know we're almost at time. Given you are a technical founder, what advice would you give to non-technical founders in managing technical teams and building, scaling, kind of in that 0 to 1 phase? What advice would you give for those founders? And I am asking this selfishly, I will say that outright. What advice would you give to non-technical founders and how they approach building? Because I also think that it's sometimes a barrier in people who are sitting on an idea or want to build or want to go down the entrepreneurial path, specifically down a tech path. If they're not technical, it feels really scary, and it feels like, oh, I don't have that background, I'm not going to be able to do it. But I think there's a lot kind of a lot there, in terms of there are so many ways to get around that. So I'm curious what your advice would be.
That's such a good question. I I think things have changed a lot with AI development. So I think that the barrier to being sort of technical is like way lower now. And I'm not one to gatekeep. Like I by trade am a developer designer. So, AI is better than me at a lot of things. And I do think that one advice I would have is like, open up Lovable or V0 or whatever your favorite tool is and just give it a try. And then I would say a more explicit, a more maybe nuanced answer is figure out the right scale you want to develop your product at. And by that, I mean like the right scale for you for what you're trying to do. So if you're someone who has 3 million YouTube subscribers and you want to launch a car auction marketplace, like one of my favorite YouTubers is a guy, Doug DeMuro. He wanted to diversify his like income streams, and so created this car auction marketplace. And he worked with like a developer designer team to do it. He probably spent a good amount of money, gave away a decent amount of equity to get it done. But like he had a natural big audience. And I would not recommend to Doug even today to say, hey, spend some time on Lovable or VZ or whatever, like getting a prototype up and see what, like, no, you have a huge distribution network. Like you have some capital. I mean, I'm not speaking for him directly, but, hire a team or hire, like invest a little bit to get it done well. And then if you're someone who's like, hey, I'm literally have in 5 hours a week, I'm interested in this idea, I want to kind of jam on it, like, then yeah, open up Lovable. Or even before that, I've had people that have had ideas where I'm like, you could test this idea by just like manually emailing or texting people or doing something a little bit more manual. I think that it's just really understanding like what your like the scale of investment that you're trying to make in solving the problem, and like the certainty and likelihood of success that you kind of ascribe to your scenario. And that should kind of dictate how much to invest in it. And it's back to that crawl, walk, run thing where, it would be demoralizing if you didn't have an audience or a way of distribution, which I think you should try to figure out what that is at the contemporaneous to figuring out your product. But if you then said, okay, I'm going to invest half of my savings in building this app, and then no one shows up, you're kind of DOA there, right? Because you've spent a lot of money, your runway is probably kind of a little shot, and you're like, I don't know what to do now, and I have this expensive asset, and maybe you're looking at some cost, et cetera. So at that point, realize, hey, maybe I should just start a little bit smaller and then scaled up, scaled up, scaled up. I think the same thing can be said for, taking on VC money. Like there's a lot of, you just have to really think to yourself, what is my scale of investment and my time horizon, both in terms of, time and money, and what assets do I have at my disposal, and then pick the right kind of building path based on that. And I think with AI, like it's made it much better to get something off the ground without investing a ton of money. And then on the flip side, if you are like ready to go and want something great, like, yeah, try to find a really good developer team, or, build that first prototype for yourself, but then quickly find someone who's like really expert in this area. And yeah, I think that's my biggest advice. It's like, there's no right answer. And even for the exact same product, it depends almost a little bit more on like what you're bringing to the table at the beginning.
I think that's great advice. And there are so many paths. There's no right way to do it. And I think you have to just think about what your specific situation is and your consideration set, and kind of pick a path and run with it. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Before we go, let everybody know where they can find you, follow along on the WedPing journey. Give us websites, handles, all the things.
Hit it, Morgan.
At WedPing, wedping.com.
At WedPing, yeah. Pick a punny name like WedPing, and no one's taking it. So yeah, we have the straight up wedping.com, very professional.
Amazing. You got the domain. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you both. This was so great. Thank you for coming on. We should do this again. I loved having you on the pod. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Natasha. Shout out Bay Area wedding tech companies. Let's go.
Exactly. We got to come together.
We're all repping.